Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kerzner.
Hello and welcome to episode 33 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul Kerzner. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me for this present moment. The title and topic for today's podcast is Grieving with Presence, and I've invited back guest host Shannon Horton to the show. Shannon is a happiness consultant, an intuitive spiritual medium, a coach, and the owner of Happiness Matters, LLC. She's someone that is very near and dear to my heart. We've been working together for quite a while, and she's had such a deep impact on my life. And it's a pleasure to have her back talking on a topic that is something that I've been working with in the present moment, a little bit of grief. I've recently ended a relationship that was really meaningful to me, and I had to go through the grieving process, the grieving stages, and I thought that it would be a good opportunity to delve deeper into a topic that everyone at some point has to experience. Before I jump into the podcast, I wanted to take a few moments to talk about a project that I've been working on. It's called Presence Coaching. Over the past 5 or 6 years, I've really had the wonderful opportunity to work very closely with patients and clients, and I have taught presence in many ways, shapes, and forms. And now I'm offering my presence coaching to the world. If you or anyone you know have been suffering with any anxiety, stress, and depression, I'd like to help work with you. What I've seen, what I've studied, what I've worked on and learned is that at the heart of anxiety, stress, and depression, there's a lack of presence. And sometimes it's appropriate and oftentimes necessary to work with another individual to help shift you out of your mindset and away from all the thoughts that are dominating your being. If you find that you're constantly thinking about the past or worrying about the future, presence coaching might be a really good fit. And I'd like to offer a free 15-minute consultation to anyone who's interested to see if together we can work towards helping you live a more full and prosperous life through presence and mindfulness. Please visit my website, www.areyoubeinpresent.com. On the top, you'll see a link for presence coaching. Read about it, think about it, and feel into it. See if you feel called to work with me. I know I can help you be more present. The question is, are you ready? Okay, now that I got all that out of the way, I'm ready to jump into podcast number 33 with guest host Shannon Horton. You know, I've been thinking about talking about grief, and, how presence and grief relate to each other, but how grief has the ability to pull us out of the present moment because we're usually grieving for things outside of what our current experience is. We're grieving a loss, and so I felt like it would be a good opportunity to talk about grieving with presence, and how we can use a tool like presence to process grief. I know there's quite a few different stages, and with my recent experience, with one of my relationships ending, how I was able to see grief for what it is with a different perception, because my efforts have been to be present and to not deny myself of whatever emotions that I've been experiencing. And so having grief show up and then intertwining it with presence was a very powerful experience for me. So I wanted to have you on so that we can talk a little bit about what your perceptions are of grief and how we can use presence and mindfulness and consciousness to work through the different levels, the different stages.
Okay. So human emotion is powerful. We're here to experience the human condition. And the problem is when we take those emotions and we hold on to them and keep them as a program to operate every day versus just being with it, understanding the pain, the triggers, and understanding the loss in the sense, what is the blessing in it? How is it helping you to change? What is it, direction is it taking you? That's the important part. You can still honor it and be with it, and then it seems to kind of flow out of your body and your present. There's stages, of course, but it starts to flow out once you take it into a different context, which is more mindful. So when we actually hold on to the grief and we get into that and don't dig deeper into it, we just take it as a, what would you call that? More of a cross to bear, and we don't heal it. That's when it takes us out of the present moment. The majority, we get stuck in a pattern of being disappointed and not putting ourselves back out there to be vulnerable. We get stuck in a pattern like that. So what's really important is when we have loss all the time. We have loss of jobs, we have loss of friends, we have loss of family members, we have loss of relationships, we have loss of dreams that don't come to fruition, but something else changed and a new dream came to fruition that was even better. There's still a lot of loss in our lives at times, and it's processing that loss and saying, okay, what's the blessing? How did it turn out? What ways is helping me to see differently? It's really digesting it and changing how you think about loss, and just saying, being with it. Okay, where am I in my body holding this loss? Where is it really feeling? What does it need me to know?
You used the word loss in a sense that's separate from the word grief.
Loss is grief. Grief tends to attach to loss. So whenever we have a loss, there is a grieving period. Some people process grief a lot faster than others. There are some things that are more grief than others, right? So when people have a drastic change, I've seen people grieve more over the loss of being laid off at a job than a loss of a family member that's passed over, because that family member was elderly and sick and they didn't want them to suffer anymore. But the loss of their job, that they were ignoring the signs for a long time, that it was time for them to move on and fulfill their calling or to do something different, it really devastated them. And they were having a hard time getting out of that grief period and embracing that moment. It triggered a huge state of fear, and it will spiral them out of control into a depression. So loss can be various for different people. It doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship or a death of a person. It could be even a loss of a job that someone held on to for a long time, and it was just time to change.
So are you saying that denying the loss will trigger more of that fear state and cause a person to experience it for a longer period of time?
Yes. So denying it, not going into it and really talking, dissecting it, asking questions to it. What could be the benefit of this? How can I see this differently? That denying it, just trying to stuff it, will actually create someone to go into that depression often.
So when you say ask questions to it, are you literally meaning that you should speak to it? You should speak to yourself? I mean, maybe we can kind of go into that a little bit.
Yes, it's powerful to speak to yourself. It's powerful to speak to your body where you hold that loss. So for you, Paul, where do you feel like you tend to hold loss and that grief that comes with that loss? Where does it show up in your body usually?
Sometimes in my chest, sometimes in my lower abdomen.
Okay.
I get an uneasy feeling. Sometimes it's a pressure or tightness.
Okay.
It can vary depending upon what the experience is, what I am grieving, what loss we're talking about,
okay,
and how I'm feeling that day.
Okay. So that could be a tightness or a heaviness in your chest or your lower abdomen area. That's where it tends to come up. So what you would do is wherever that is, you want to step back and take a deep breath and say, okay, I'm just going to be present with that in my body. I'm going to feel it in my body. And what is it telling me? You can close your eyes. Some people aren't very visual. So you could just say, I'm going to be feeling, some people are very feeling, sensing. Some people are more hearing their messages. Some people see their messages. Some people have all senses. It all depends what it works for you. So you would go into that area and you would hold that space and say, okay, I am aware that I'm grieving. I have this loss. And it's creating this feeling in my body. However, what are you trying to tell me about this loss? How are you projecting me into a different direction? How do you want me to see it differently? What is the blessing? Asking questions like that and just waiting for the answer. Sometimes you get an answer immediately. Other times it may just be something that it's not there quite yet, or you're not able to see it or allowing it. You just say, okay, let me know when it's time for me to have that answer. But you feel it and you honor it and you thank it for being there, because it's, the grief is that process. It actually, when we get over grief, that grief is actually helping us to change our direction and our perception in life. So when we just honor it and thank it and say, okay, this is where I am and this is what I've learned, this is where I want to be, we can change it. But stuffing it and not dealing with it, making ourselves too busy, avoidant, being avoidant is the common thing with people. They stuff and they get themselves so busy that they don't have time to deal with their grief or their loss. Or they say, oh, it didn't matter. But when someone says, oh, it didn't matter, they have that defensive response. I know it mattered, because they don't want to dig into it.
Yeah.
Right? It's still a wound. And the key is not to keep it as a wound. The grief shouldn't be a wound that you carry for the rest of your life.
So it's the presence that we use to not necessarily confront the grief, but to embrace it.
Embrace it, yes.
And so by doing that, that allows for the grief and the different stages of grief to make its way through our reality.
Exactly.
I think with my recent experience, I was really... I found it to be really interesting to observe the different stages that I was passing through. I mean, the first stage to me was definitely shock. And, through shock, I was trying to make my way through towards acceptance, but it's not such a linear, straight path because of emotions and memories and all these things, and how deep did I want to go, or does a person want to go into the grief state in those moments, because it's far easier, to deny it or to numb ourselves or to distract ourselves. It takes a lot more courage and wherewithal to sit with it, for a period of time, hopefully not too long, but to sit with those feelings and to work with it, and to have those conversations with ourselves, and hopefully we have some people to support us through our grieving process, not with a dependency, but so that we can process it internally and externally.
Exactly. To have a different perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of times people will have a different perspective, or they'll give you a profound question that like, well, I never thought about that question. That's pretty profound. And you can almost feel instantly the grief and where it's held in your body lighten up. And that's the key. You're giving yourself an ability to, if you're present with it, for it just to naturally move the way it needs to move through your body, all levels of your body, so mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Okay? You give it that process. And from my experience as a body worker and a psychic, the last place for it to ever heal is in your physical body. That's where it gets stuck. We can spiritually process it, we can mentally process it, and then we emotionally process it, and then physically process it. And a lot of people don't physically process out their griefs or their traumas out of their body. And what happens is it creates pain, or chronic illness, or chronic upsets. Migraine headaches. I've seen people with migraine headaches. I've seen people with low back pain. I've seen people manifest, fibroids. I've seen people manifest, like energetic bubbles in their, like little cysts and then they go away once they deal with what was going on, right? They just dissipate naturally. So it's really interesting how the physical body will react, and people not dealing with the physical, where is it in my body, will actually get stuck. And until you heal it out of your physical body, it repeats sometimes. It resurfaces in other ways.
I think that's the challenge, like for people who take psychotropic medications, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, in a sense to self-medicate, but that's not really treating the root or treating what the grief is asking for. And like you said, eventually it becomes something physical, something tangible. And that's a tough lesson. That's a tough road to live, because it gets compounded.
Yes.
It's like people, and I'm not excluded, who at times have denied the grief or the loss, and tried to numb it out, and then another grief or loss comes in, and it just becomes this cycle, and then it becomes really hard to unravel. And there's a lot more work to be done on that path than to experience a loss and go through the different stages of grief, and feel those and live it for a little while and be done with it.
Exactly. So grief, it takes toll. It can actually take a toll on people's bodies. It can take a toll on their ability to live life and be vulnerable and be open to opportunity again, or to be open to love again. And that's the key with relationships. When we lose a relationship, sometimes people just totally shut down, right? It reminds me of Bette Midler's song "The Rose." Like, she does a great metaphor in the sense of that those who have experienced pain, who build thorns and they no longer let people in, but then there are people who are vulnerable again, right? That there's a choice that you can have the choice of shutting down, or you can have the choice of living. And if you shut down in one area, you're shutting down in all. It's all interconnected. In holism, and this, it's all connected. So if you're shutting down in relationships, in romantic relationships or personal relationships, it's shutting you out from you receiving life in other areas, in your business, in your career, in your relationships with children, in your ability to manifest what you want in life in general, your great dreams. You're shutting that down. So it's important for people to understand, where there's unresolved grief, there's an awful lot of energy being used, manifestation energy that you could be using elsewhere, clogging it up to protect that grief.
Yeah. And
once you free it, once you be with it, you're just present with it, and you just allow it to just do what it needs to do to process out of all layers of your body, your ether body and your physical body, then that energy is freed up. And what can you do with that energy that's not working so hard to protect that old grief and avoid, right?
Yeah.
Then your dreams start manifesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm totally with you. I get it. It's not an easy path, and so you don't want to paint it as such, because there's challenge.
Exactly.
Someone once told me that relationships are one of the highest spiritual orders that we can embrace here on earth. But at the same time, that comes with a litany of challenges.
Exactly.
And sometimes it ends up in loss.
Exactly.
Which by itself is its own lesson and challenge. And I think that everyone deals with it differently. I think the message that at least that I'm trying to share here, is that when you combine grief with presence, it provides you with an opportunity to heal deeply and in a more profound and smooth way, instead of using something like repression or denial, which will allow for the grief to linger a lot longer and show up in different ways, ultimately in the physical body.
Exactly. I know it's not easy. Grief is not easy. And if someone was not taught how to process grief, or proper coping skills, healthy coping skills, it can be devastating, because people take it personal, right? We take things personal. So not personalizing it so much, saying, okay, where could I have changed? Where could I have corrected my stuff? What is it triggering in me? That's the best way of self-growth. I heard someone tell me that because something happened, there was a loss, and it wasn't a loss of a person or a relationship, but a loss in one area of their life, that they said, well, I might as well let the rest of my area of my life crash and burn. And I was like, whoa, you're going to give someone so much power that you are going to let yourself destroy the rest of your life? You can give that person that much power to destroy the rest of your life, what you've worked so hard for? And they looked at me like, oh, the light bulb went on. Like, why would I even do that? But some people do that. Some people, because one thing happens, one big loss, and they have so much grief, and they're taking it so personal that they're not good enough, or they're not worthy, or that they're allowing it to spiral out of control and to give that situation or thing or person enough power to destroy the rest of their life. Is that really worth it?
No. But
no.
I mean, but you can understand.
I can understand
that thought process. It's like totally a defense mechanism to just shut it down so that they don't have to experience that level of pain again.
Exactly. However, the amount of pain that they're creating by allowing their life to spiral out of control and destroy is even greater than the pain if they just dealt with the grief and say, you know what, the door is closing. It's just something better's around the door for me. And this is an opportunity for me to be more pickier about what I want to put my energy to. This is great. Yeah.
I think that takes a level of acceptance by itself.
Exactly.
And acceptance is certainly a behavior that has a lot to do with presence, but it's something that you can't really pick and choose when it comes to acceptance. You have to accept everything with the understanding that it's for your greater good, even though it doesn't feel good. Like, acceptance doesn't mean that all your moments are going to be great. It means that, like, you understand that there's a bigger picture here.
Exactly.
And I guess maybe that's what we're both talking about, is that we have to be focused on the bigger picture, which is our lives, which is how we navigate the world, which is our desires, and what we want to manifest and create. And it's hard not to get caught into some of these smaller picture things, or the moments that feel terrible that we never want to experience again. Because, grief doesn't necessarily have to do with the loss of a person like you were talking about before. It shows up in many different facets.
Exactly.
And I guess that's where we have to be reminded that it's our perception of the experience, and ultimately our perception of the grief, that's going to give us the greatest opportunity to learn from it and to accept it and not to deny it.
Exactly. So by accepting it, you're with it, you're present with it. And often it may be that you just, you're given maybe 5 minutes sometimes for some people to the presence with it, and it will dissipate. Others, it may take an hour. Others, it might take a whole day. It depends on the person. But the key is that you are taking control back, in the sense that you're not allowing the grief to control your vibration for the rest of your life or the rest of your day. Does that make sense? You're with it, and you say, okay, I got to be with this. You want to be able to honor and stop and be with it. But you want to control the vibration that you're in. So if you're giving 95 to 100% of your vibration to the grief, you want to watch that and say, okay, I can be present with it, but am I going to allow my whole day to be ruled by this grief? And you don't have to. And some people, this is the thing, we are trained as a society that we are thought that we, in order to not look shallow or uncaring, that we have to be this martyr, like grief. So if we lose a loved one, how long are we supposed to wear the black? How long, technically, in our energy, right? For people who've lost people, that it's okay. You don't have to be sad 100% of the time every day, right? You still live your life, because your loved ones aren't going to want you to destroy your life and not live it, or not take hold of opportunity and not be happy on the other side. They want you to be happy, right? They want you to live their life. They want you to have the best life possible in their memory. So we're hold that old thing, like you're supposed to be solemn for so long, right? And who knows how long that's supposed to be. But no, even if it's like a couple of days after and you're laughing, you're having joy, that's good, because you're giving yourself an opportunity to heal and revisit your life and move on. And it doesn't mean that you aren't sad that they're gone. It just means that you're giving that sadness only a percentage of your vibration every day.
Yes. But on the flip side, grieving is a subjective process.
Mm-hmm.
And so while you don't necessarily have to be in mourning for days or weeks or whatever it is, you have to go through it in a way that feels right to you, so that you can properly process it and let it go. Because the loss could really be devastating.
Exactly.
And a devastating loss will not alleviate within a matter of moments, or, I mean, it technically could, I guess, based on your perception. But if you lose someone that you really loved, whether it's they pass away or a relationship ends, you're going to have to give it as much time as you need. And whether that means, days, months, I mean, hopefully not months, but, and you're going to have to find different ways to port it, whether it's, counseling or journaling, or, whatever, going on a hike. It doesn't matter. That's where the presence comes in for you to start discovering in those moments what is going to give you some level of relief in a healthy, holistic way.
Exactly. So it's asking, you might even be asking the question, just putting it out to the universe. What can I do to really help me be present with this grief and heal it and process it in the most efficient way for me, so that I can create the life I want and be still me and still taking hold of opportunity. I've just seen a lot of people they don't know how long they have to be in mourning. They think they don't want to be judged. That's their biggest fear, being judged, that I should be, but I'm at peace, I'm at peace with it. They have a sense of peace with what happened, and they're like, well, should I be in more mourning? I was in mourning for a few days, weeks, a couple weeks, and it almost sometimes they get guilt. Guilt comes in because they actually have, like, I've seen people who've said that they were relieved that they started having guilt because they were finally relieved that the person passed away. But I said, you're not relieved because they're gone. You're relieved because they're no longer in pain and suffering. And you're no longer in pain and suffering too, especially if they were a caretaker. If they were a caretaker 24/7, taking care of someone who could barely take care of themselves, that's a huge burden. That's a huge responsibility at times. Like, it's exhausting. Caretakers are often very exhausted. They don't take time for themselves. So to be relieved that their loved one is not deteriorating and suffering anymore, in chronic pain, or watching them not being able to remember anymore who that person was in their life, and there was someone so important, that they're relieved over that. They're not relieved over that their loved one's not here. They're relieved over the fact that the loved one's not suffering, and they're not suffering anymore, right? Because caretakers, they have a lot of pain and suffering themselves too. Of watching their loved ones deteriorate. It's very hard on them. And so they often get guilt. Not only are they dealing with grief, but they have guilt coming in because they're like, I'm a bad person for feeling relieved that they're dead. It's not that. They're relieved that the pain and suffering of everyone is done. Finally done. And that's what I want to give people, the big distinction, that there could be guilt too. People could feel guilty that they're no longer at their job. Like, oh, I should feel guilty, that I'm no longer there for their family or whatever perspective. No, don't feel guilty. The universe is providing you a new doorway to open up to whatever it is you really want to do. What your calling is, or choosing better. Okay, a new journey awaits. But often grief, there is a little sidebar of guilt that creeps in because people are judging themselves and how they think society is seeing them.
Yeah. And I guess that also has to do with a lack of presence.
Yes.
Because you're probably shooting yourself into the future or ruminating about the past. And again, like, grief does have a lot to do with the past. So it's important to start to differentiate when you're experiencing those feelings. Like, what is it that you're feeling in that moment versus what is it that you're feeling about something that happened in a past moment that might be better left in the past.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The past is the past for a reason, right? It's not who we are today. It helped our journey to who we are today, but once yesterday ended, we're not the same person that we were yesterday. We learned new things. We experienced new things. We learned how to relate to people differently or see things a little differently. So therefore, we are different today. So keeping us prisoner to the past is, judging ourselves based that what we were in the past. That's not true. And we tend to do that with each other. We have past experience with that person, so we're holding them prisoner even if they're not the same person at all. They learned to not even be close to that. They're very different. We sometimes hold them to their past, and we're actually preventing ourselves from being present with them and being in the joy of who they really are today.
So if someone came to you and was in a deep state of grief and mourning, and they felt despondent, just didn't know what to do with themselves, what would be your first suggestion?
First thing I would do is really help them get in tune with where they're holding it. Where are they holding it in their body? Because when someone's despondent, they're not feeling, right? They're only feeling the grief. They're not sensing or perceiving. So a lot of times they're shutting themselves out from external vibration and their own vibration in the body. A lot of times they don't even know where it is in their body. So I take them to take a deep breath and think of their safe space. And then I have them feel where it is in their body so that they can connect to it, so that they can address it and get their answers. And sometimes it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to get them there. It's very slow moving with some people. But just getting one or two answers, you don't know the power. I have witnessed just with one or two answers that you would judge maybe as simple, that it changes their whole life. It actually, them getting those answers freed them enough where they're reconnecting, where they're actually allowing more joy in their life. They're not as despondent anymore. They're starting to fill with light again. They're starting to be able to function and sense things around them. And then it's a journey, it's a process. It's where, okay, let's do a little more. Let's do a little more. People who are despondent, usually when I have people who've lost people and I talk to their loved ones, that clears up a lot of their despondency. That they get peace. So, and they're able to move forward. When it comes to other situations where they're just shut down, that they are at their max because their life has been a certain way and they need to learn new coping skills, new way of perceiving things, a new way of behaving. That's a little different. Okay, it's getting them in touch with where it's held first, because we got to get them in their body, out of their emotion. We got to get them into sensing something and feeling it and reconnecting with a part of themselves that they're disconnecting with.
Okay, so it's the reconnection, and then it's walking them through the next steps like communication and trying to understand the situation a little bit better, change their perception, bringing them more into the present moment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And what behavior do they do when they're in grief? A lot of people will push people away. Some people will shut down their whole life. Like nobody will get in. Other people, they might do extreme things. With their grief. You have to understand why their behaviors. You asking them, what do you do when this type of behavior is happening? When this type of thing is happening, what is your typical behavioral response? And they'll sit and they'll think and they'll say, I do this. Well, what's the opposite healthy thing? If it's a very unhealthy thing, what is the opposite healthy behavior? And they'll tell me. They come up with their own answers usually. Okay, and that's important because I don't have their answers for them. We have our own innate answers. I can tune into that. It might be the same answer I'm getting, but for them to recognize that answer, it's really profound, because then it vibrates on all different levels: mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And they can start being aware of it. Like there's a consciousness. Once you bring consciousness to something, someone cannot go to being unconscious in that area, right? It's painful.
Totally. Yeah, it's just like helping them wake up again.
Yes.
Awakening them to their truth.
Exactly.
So this has been an informative podcast for sure.
Yes.
Grief is something that is unavoidable in the human experience. in some way, shape, or form, everyone is going to feel grief. And there are healthy ways to deal with it, as we talked about, and there are unhealthy ways. We understand why people do the things they do. A lot of it's just protection. And maybe they just didn't have good modeling growing up. Regardless of all of that, though, the striving for presence at least gives people a path. It gives them a little bit more clarity, and helps them shift their perceptions on what's going on. Because emotions have a really great way of clouding our reality. Yes. And when we're experiencing any kind of sense of loss and the emotions kick up, it's really hard to see our way through, and to accept whatever it is, and to make our way through the different stages and not get bogged down. So, if anyone's listening and they're going through any level of grief, I do hope that this podcast has at least provided some suggestions, maybe a little bit more clarity, that will make their current experience a little bit easier.
Exactly. And like I said, everybody's different how they process grief, but it's really being present in their body, being aware, okay, I feel fine, but are you not really fine because you've clogged up your schedule with so much that you can't even stop to be present? I've witnessed people who, when they're dealing with funerals and things like that, that they're so busy for months, and then it hits them, and it hits them hard. And they think that within those months that they were, I processed the grief. Well, they just hit another level of grief, right? Because they hit another stage. Because often the first stage is almost like denial, that they're so busy doing things and busy with their lives with that. Then it hits that, okay, recognizing that it's really loss. It's really there. Okay.
Multiple layers of grief. That sounds great.
Yes, there are different layers, different stages of grief. Some people move through them fast, some move slow, some move moderately. It all depends on the circumstance and how they are responding to it.
Yeah, of course. And remember, reality is subjective, so everyone's going to deal with things differently.
Exactly.
Based on how they feel and what their desires are.
Exactly. Everything's perception. Everything is perception. So if things are, if you're seeing something that makes you feel really awful, miserable, you might want to step back and say, okay, how can I change this to where I at least can not feel so unhealthy? How can I see this in a different way where it gives me more peace or neutrality? So I'm not having all these unhealthy fight or flight hormones raging through my system that are creating illness, immune issues, or potential for illness. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
So if people listening want to get in touch with you.
Okay. My name is Shannon Horton, and you can reach me at beyondspiritualhealing.com. I'm on Facebook, and on my website is my phone number and my email. They can reach me there.
Perfect.
Okay.
Shannon, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
You're welcome, Paul. Thank you for having me. This is exciting. I can't talk this morning.
I want to thank everyone for listening, and I want to welcome everyone back to the present moment.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.